We've been doing several stories on Pete Buttigieg lately, the South Bend mayor who's running for president. And we just broke one yesterday regarding a secret report that was leaked and that we obtained a portion of that appears to contradict, that does contradict, claims that Mayor Buttigieg made publicly about it at the time. And we reported that, and we spoke to people and gave the campaign a chance to confirm the report's authenticity and all of that. So I think we were responsible and dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. But we got a lot of pushback on it. And I understand why. I think I understand why. And especially because we've been doing a number of stories on Pete Buttigieg, and they're potentially damaging, right? They're news stories, so they're not fluff pieces, they're not profile pieces. These are stories that we did them because we think they raise serious questions and because we think they're credible. And so if you look at our output for the last couple months, it's Buttigieg this, Buttigieg that, and it's not crazy to think these guys have it out for Pete Buttigieg, they're trying to take him down, they're in the tank for Bernie or whoever, and so that's why they're doing this. And especially in these times, I understand why people would feel that way. It's harder than ever to trust the media, not that we ever should have, and it's harder than ever not to think that things are being done for political purposes, right? Especially in an era when we see so many things that really are being done for political purposes. So I did want to acknowledge, yes, we have been doing more reporting on Pete Buttigieg than we have been on other candidates and even on President Trump lately at this moment. And I can't necessarily convince you or anyone that I didn't sit down and look at everyone's policy positions and say, this is who I want to be president and this is who I don't want to be president. So therefore, I'm going to go out and either report or make up stories about this one because I prefer that one, and this one is clearly going to be the one who's most in their way. If you think that's how journalism works, or reporters or human beings work, I probably can't convince you otherwise. What I can tell you is what went on in my head as the managing editor and a reporter at TYT Investigates that led to where we are now with our current focus on Pete Buttigieg. So I don't remember exactly when he announced his exploratory committee, but it was back in March when I was coming off my prior focus, which had been on the Fellowship Foundation, which is the backer and main organizer of the National Prayer Breakfast. And I was very focused on them for a while because I thought there was reporting to be done that wasn't being done elsewhere. Coming off that reporting, I looked around at the presidential field and thought, who would be interesting to look at? And, I did some reading up on Beto O'Rourke, and there are some questions about, I think it's his father-in-law's bank and property that was under debate in Texas, and neighborhoods that were kind of getting ravaged. And it seemed like there was some really interesting stuff there. But it also seemed like other people had already reported it, right? So as a reporter, I should make one thing clear. At TYT, we don't have 22 reporters. I can't assign one reporter to each presidential candidate. So what I need to do is I need to figure out what's the Venn diagram between the entire field and what our resources can support us looking into, and where we think that we have a chance of breaking actual stories, right? And so when Mayor Buttigieg came along, he was coming from a background that was uniquely unscrutinized, had been uniquely unscrutinized throughout his career, right? Most of the candidates have either been governors, they get state level coverage, if not national coverage. They've been senators, they get state level coverage and national coverage. So they get vetted a lot more. So in some sense, if you want to call it opportunistic, that's fine. But my own background was in local journalism. That's how I started off, as a print reporter in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, covering the 6-8 precinct, covering the Community Board 10, covering the school board, all of this stuff. And so I felt, you know what? My guess is that there are stories that are of national importance or interest that are yet unreported by either the local media or the national media. And so I went there. I went to South Bend for 5 days in early April. And I met a fair number of people. And when I met people who sort of rejoiced in the taking down of Pete Buttigieg, right? I would talk to people and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Tell me more about this. And then they would go on not just to answer my questions or provide me with information or contacts or whatever, or background, whatever it might be, but they would also kind of glory in the idea of taking him down. And I would literally say, just so you know, I'm not that guy, okay? My function is not to take anyone down. My function is to serve what I see as my role in the process, which is to provide information so that voters at the end of the day, or the beginning of the day, or whenever in the day, they want to start assessing candidates, they have as much information as possible. That's who I'm in the tank for. Voters who want information. So I would say, I'm not that guy. I'm not here to take him down. And just so we're clear, I heard plenty of worse things about him than I am reporting. And I don't mean that to say he's a terrible guy, you just don't know it. What I mean is, I had reason not to consider those things credible. That's why we're not reporting them. So in the edit room, and yes, I understand I'm the managing editor, but I have to make editorial decisions about what I'm running. And I'm sitting there saying, no, that's unfair to Mayor Buttigieg. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. So we're limiting our reporting to stories where we have reason to believe that the information we're reporting is credible. We ask the Buttigieg campaign to respond almost literally point by point before we go to print to specifics that we have to say that we are planning to report, and give them a chance to tell us that's wrong or that's not fair, here's why. And those discussions have happened. I've been in touch with his press secretary. You've seen him quoted. You've seen the press secretary quoted in our reporting. So it's not that we're not giving them an opportunity to knock stuff down or even to flag something that they don't consider fair. We are. And I do want to talk a little bit about the concerns about, well, you're going to have X effect on the process, right? Pete Buttigieg is the best chance to beat President Trump. Therefore, anything you do that hurts Mayor Buttigieg is bad in helping Trump. I have to say, that level of precognition after 2016 to me is astounding, okay? I have no idea what's going to happen as a result of my stories or anyone else's stories. And there's a very credible body of political science that says exactly this kind of vetting happening now is to the candidate's benefit, right? For a couple reasons. One, it's early in the process. Very few people are paying attention. Two, it gives the candidate the practice, the workout of responding to what they might consider negative attacks, right? If the first time you have to deal with negative information is when you're on the debate stage, 10 feet away from President Trump, that's not a good time to learn. So even if you think this is about affecting outcomes, we don't know how it's going to affect outcomes. So I would ask people to keep that stuff in mind, and because we're going to be doing more reporting on Pete Buttigieg. We're literally in the process of working on other stories that we think are credible and we think are important and that we think you and everyone else should at least have your fingertips if you choose to pursue it. And in terms of whether that's because I've made some calculated decision that Pete Buttigieg's agenda is here and Cory Booker is here, but Kamala Harris is here and Bernie Sanders is here, I don't have that kind of time, guys. So, at some point, when you go to a city and you spend 5 days there, you meet people, it's a domino effect, right? It leads to other stories. So we've continued to break stories since I've been there. I'm still in touch with people. I'm still following up on things I've heard. But at some point, the pipeline kind of dries up. And just as I moved on from the Fellowship Foundation, we move on. And it might be, if you guys have a tip about Bernie Sanders' love child, I'm kidding. Whatever it might be, we've got a tip line, the Young Turks at Proton Mail. So you can hit me up on Twitter, DM me if you want to tell me something. We try to be agnostic and find stories that we think matter and should matter and might have an impact and maybe should have an impact. So if you're still pissed at us for doing stories about Pete Buttigieg, you're allowed to be, but I would say if you want to focus on the positive and you're a Buttigieg backer, instead of knocking the democratic process of which journalism is a part, right? We're in a time when I think it's really important to maintain our norms. Knocking the press for saying things that you don't like, if that's what you subscribe to, you've already got the president for you, okay? If on the other hand, you understand that this isn't about gods and heroes, but about fallible human beings, and that the process is supposed to be adversarial, right? Checks and balances. If you believe in America, you freaking love checks and balances. Well, I don't know whether I'm a check or a balance, but I'm in there, and our reporting is. So you don't have to like it, you don't have to read it. If you support Pete Buttigieg, I encourage you, go out there and ring doorbells, do everything you can to elevate his presidency. But I wouldn't shut off or write off the entire national media or any media simply because you don't like what they're saying. And one last point, and then I'll shut up and hopefully address some of the things you guys are saying, is that I see a lot of people saying they're skeptical about our stories. And that's great. You should be skeptical about our stories. You should be skeptical about all stories. But the people who say they're skeptical often say, it's not true. Well, that's not being skeptical. That's deciding what is true without evidence. That's the opposite of being skeptical. And when you decide that you don't believe it's true, not only don't believe it's true, you believe it's not true, you're not being skeptical, you're being tribal. So be skeptical of our reporting, please. I ask you to. We post links to all the documents that we're talking about. We are on social media. So if you've got something that exposes that we've got something wrong, we're vulnerable, we're out there. But the moment you decide it's not true, that's not skepticism. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not American.